Hey everybody, what's going on? We're doing something a little different with this video. Piper Frasier came out with a statement called The Truth. And I'm not really going to commentate on it, but I do want everybody to see it. So I had Bunny from the broadcast, my Bunny. I had her go and read it out for me, and we put it together in a video. Let me know what you think about it below. I do have certain opinions, but again, this is just her thoughts. There's no receipts, there's no screenshots of anything or anything of that matter. So again, this is a she said, he said type of situation, but he hasn't said anything yet. Again, these are just allegations. We don't know everything. And pretty much I'm just going to leave it at that until things are actually shown. And they may not be. This simply could be a way for her to get everything off her chest. I don't know. I'm not saying she's a liar. The only thing I am saying is these are just allegations. This is the truth, written by Piper Frasier and read out by our beloved Bunny.
Hi, I'm Piper, and most of you know me as the ex-wife of Logan Portnier from the Body Language channel, Observe. Now that we are officially divorced, I'm here to speak the truth about what happened and who Logan is. If you've been following me, you know that in the past I've been pretty open about my abuser, but have had to stay silent during the divorce proceedings. Today, I want to very clearly say that Logan Portnier of Observe is my abuser. I was also a victim of abuse and assault by his partner manager, Bunny Ann, or her real name. No one enters a relationship thinking that they will be abused by their significant other. So to more clearly explain how things got to the point of explosion, I will go back in time and tell you how things got to this point. I met Logan when I was a month shy of 19 and he was freshly 21. At the time, I had just moved to Bozeman, Montana, and I met him through one of my brothers. Logan was attending Montana Bible College to become a pastor, and I was working at a coffee shop and also dating someone long distance. Logan and I became friends quickly, and he was perfectly charming and made me feel like he understood me. He was really into reading body language, and I was very quiet, so I felt like he knew me every time he would read that I was in pain and no one else knew. Eventually, he convinced me to leave my boyfriend for him, and we began dating. I was surprised when he very quickly wanted to buy me expensive things and was showering me with compliments, affection, and gifts. As someone who had spent their life being the outcast of the group, this attention felt intoxicating. Very soon after we started dating, literally everyone in my life was telling me he wasn't a good person and I should break up with him. I, of course, ran to him with these accusations, and he convinced me everyone was just out to get him, and it was just us against the world. Again, as someone who has always been desperate for attention, all of this love bombing just swept me up, and I was hooked. Fast forward 2 years, and we're getting married. Up until this point, he had been incredibly physically affectionate with me, and I had expressed that this was my love language. Although we were conservative Christians, we sinned and had sex before marriage. After that, I was sure I couldn't marry anyone else because I was now damaged goods according to my religion. He was the only one I could be with. I had sinned and no one could know. I remember the night before my wedding, laying in bed and every part of my body just screaming to run, to go upstairs and tell my parents I wanted out of this wedding. But I was damaged. I had sinned. I deserved this, and I went through with the wedding. That evening, when we got to the honeymoon suite, he changed. He had been making grand promises about how amazing and physically charged our honeymoon would be, but once we got there and I put on the pretty lingerie I'd picked out for him, he scoffed at me and said, What the fuck makes you think I would want to have sex with you right now? And he pulled away every time I tried to get close just to cuddle. I was incredibly confused, but tried to rationalize it, that he was just tired from the long day. That rationale ran out, though, when he continued throughout the next month to bait me throughout the day with spicy texts. And then, when we were home together, he would jump back when I would touch his arm and say things like, "What are you? A fucking sex addict? You wanted sex yesterday, why would you want it today too?" Even though he had made sexual promises all day long. This went on for 3 years until I gave up. I played along when he flirted, but expected nothing if he promised it. I gave up on how I looked, gave up on trying to initiate with him. I just gave up on having any intimate desires at all. He was less explosive, and we had fewer fights when I just had no needs, so that's what I began doing. He then learned that he could coerce me into sex by love bombing and only initiating when he had put me down and knew I would feel like I had to say yes. This continued throughout our relationship. So after we got married in 2017, there is so much I could say, like how within 6 months I was researching signs you're in a relationship with a narcissist because he was making me feel insane. But we would be here all day if I did that, so let's just flash forward to the end of 2019, where I was the sickest I'd ever been with my endometriosis. I was using my walker just to get from my bed to the bathroom. He's the most obsessed he's ever been with his YouTube channel. He had always been too invested in it, but it was a lot during this time. He spent all of his free time fucking around with his unnecessary sets and editing videos for his 20,000 subscribers, which I know now means absolutely nothing. He refused to get a full-time job because it took away from his time to make videos, even though we weren't able to pay our bills or get our groceries most weeks. He continued to purchase equipment, and when I would question him on it, he would scream at me and say I didn't have a say since I didn't make most of our money, and he needed it. He refused to live in a cheaper, smaller place because he needed a whole room for his YouTube channel. During this time, he also insisted I try to sell feet pics and made and managed an account he made for my feet. It went nowhere and I felt used. On March 6th, 2020, I had a surgery in Atlanta, Georgia. The day before we left, he and I had an open conversation about how we were feeling. And because he had been calm during it, I felt safe to say I didn't feel like I had enough emotional support from him as I was going through this horrible time of pain. For reference, I had been passing out almost daily and vomiting from how intense the pain was I was in. When I said that to him, he burst into tears and ran down the hall yelling and then collapsed on the floor into the fetal position. He was saying that he sacrificed everything for me, and how dare I say he doesn't support me, and I was doing that just to hurt him, and he gives everything to me and I give him nothing. I, of course, comforted him and apologized for what I said. The next day on the plane, when I was nonstop vomiting from the pain I was in, I looked to him for help. He told me to be quiet. I was interrupting his movie. When the airport attendant pushing my wheelchair was asking invasive questions about my health and fertility, he interrupted me and to answer her questions with intimate details about my health without my consent. The night before my surgery, I was having a panic attack about being able to get to the hospital without vomiting or passing out, and he told me to shut up and be quiet so he could sleep. Clearly, he was super emotionally supportive, just like he said he was. There are so many details I could share about this time, but let's fast forward to when YouTube took off for him. I believe it was August of 2020, and Jeffree Star had just released his Golden couch apology video. I was taking a bath on the other side of Logan's studio wall and suggested he make a video about it. The next day it blew up. What he didn't know was that while he was recording that video, I was looking at studio apartments in my hometown and considering reaching out to my family to help me get out. I was tired of screaming and fighting and journaling that I wanted to be loved and happy. But when the Xylie Star video took off, Logan calmed. He was receiving praise from thousands of people. He got his first YouTube plaque. He got his first large paycheck, and we were able to pay our bills for the first time. Life seemed to be looking up. However, we were still fighting, and when we did, it was explosive. Screaming, slamming doors, and him telling me to just leave, and when I would say, "Okay, I'm leaving," he would break down crying and beg me to stay, making grand promises of how he would change and telling me that I had nowhere to go anyway because, in his words, my family didn't want me. He would make grand apologies with gifts, aka love bombing. He also frequently told me that since he had taken an apology class and I hadn't, that he was the only one in our relationship who knew how to apologize properly. A common phrase of his during fights was, "You have no ground to stand on," when I try to bring up something that bothered me. This all continued and we moved to Seattle in 2021. He was constantly exclaiming how great life was now that we had a big home and he was making a lot of money. I, however, was more unhappy than ever. He was constantly reading my body language, assuming how I was feeling, telling me that I was lying because my body language wasn't matching up, and then gaslighting me by saying he didn't read me. I had no money of my own, and I had to ask every time I spent anything. I was questioning my reality at every turn. I was completely isolated because any time I tried to do something social to make friends, including a virtual art hangout, he would have a meltdown about how lonely he was and how dare I take time away from him. Didn't I know how bad it was for him to be alone with his thoughts? This is where I suggested we explore non-monogamy. We rarely had sex. I felt the desire to explore my sexuality, and I secretly just wanted someone to show affection to me. At the suggestion that we explore the idea of monogamy, he jumped straight to, "Let's download apps," which I'm sure you can imagine did not go well. I had major success immediately, and he had no matches. This led to his biggest meltdown and threats yet. He threatened to leave, then told me to leave and go be with someone that I matched with that day, told me that I ruined our marriage by suggesting non-monogamy, made a huge scene while we walked our dog, and generally verbally attacked me. I finally calmed him down by deleting the apps and organizing a meeting with a couples therapist. In January 2022, we began seeing our therapist, Sarah. I had no idea what a bad idea therapy with Logan was. He would act one way in our sessions and then scream at me after. He would tell me not to share things so he wouldn't look bad to her. When he threw something during a fight and it breezed past my face, and I told him that if he threw something again, I was going to leave, and I brought it to Sarah. His excuse was that he had to get his anger out, and it was small, so why did it matter? Sarah had separate sessions with us that week, where she had asked if I felt safe. And I lied and said yes because I thought he could be listening in. When I told her that I couldn't even go to the grocery store alone because he would have a meltdown, she told me, "Isn't that a lot of control for someone to have over you?" And I said, "Is it?" Just completely unable to grasp what was happening to me. To me, I thought all this was normal because I had no one to share any of this with and had been trained to never say a bad word about my husband. He always had an excuse and always made up for what he did. And he took a class on apologies, so he means it, right? Well, he threw a phone onto my camera that was next to me on a bed, and his phone broke, and I didn't leave. I hid that one from therapy because I was ashamed I didn't leave. He never threw anything around me again, but during fights he would say, "I'm trying so hard not to throw something right now, you should be grateful," which was chilling every time. Around this time, we met Bunny through her now ex-husband, whom Logan had met in 2015 when they both were working at Walmart. Bunny was a charming friend, seemed to care about us, and to no one's surprise, was also polyamorous. In April of 2022, Logan and I had decided with Sarah that we would start exploring relationships outside of ours. However, when I asked out Bunny, Logan threw a fit, saying I was ruining our marriage and tried to gaslight Sarah and me into believing I had done it maliciously. Thankfully, she didn't fall for it, and neither did I. He also had a meltdown saying, "I thought we would share Bunny." And I was just like, she's not a toy, she's a person. In May, Bunny and I began dating, and to set the scene for our relationship, we only ever cuddled and held hands occasionally. Unfortunately, this was also around the time when the endo was getting bad again, and I was having to use a wheelchair or walker to get to most places, just for context. Soon after we started dating, Logan and Bunny started hanging out one-on-one, while both claiming nothing was going on. I think it was literally the week after I started dating her, Logan hired her without telling me first. Then things really started to go downhill. In July, I had surgery in Portland. Logan and Bunny both came with me. Logan couldn't handle seeing physical affection between Bunny and me, despite saying differently whenever questioned about it. So the night after my surgery, we were all hanging out in the bedroom where I was recovering, and Bunny was next to me. Upon seeing me touch her knee, Logan got up and left the room in a huff. He went and sat in the kitchen to cry, and Bunny got up to go comfort him. During this time, I could hear their whole conversation, which lasted hours. Logan and Bunny discussed how I had apparently coerced Logan into polyamory, despite him actively messaging people through dating apps and us literally going to therapy for it, where he weakly agreed with where we were at, and how it was so disrespectful of me because of how much he had given up to take care of me and how good life was for him, and I just wanted to ruin it. After he had seemingly vented enough, then they began discussing spirituality and how much spiritually mature they both were than everyone else, and how much they thought they were each other's soulmates. While they were having this lengthy conversation, I needed my surgery medication, so I texted Logan, which he replied, "Be right there." Then took over an hour and a half to bring me my medication, and he yelled at me for interrupting him because I should have known that he would need to vent about me. After all, I was taking so much work. I was drugged and in pain and shock, so I just sat and took it, then silently cried myself to sleep like most every other night. The next morning, they both acted like nothing happened. After this time, Logan's followers have voted on the charity I chose, the Endometriosis Research Center, for the collaboration with Kurt River. I was supposed to design these shirts as I'm an artist and am the one with endo. However, when I was recovering on the couch, I heard him give her the task in another room. I couldn't fight it. He made sure I had no say anytime I brought things up that related to Observe, because I had no grounds to stand on. This one hurt. In August, Bunny and I had a date that went well, even though we had been butting heads since the day we got together. When we hugged goodbye, she went to kiss me. This would have been fine had we not explicitly decided many times that before she and I kissed, I wanted her to ask for consent because I might not be ready for it. The real truth was, Logan wasn't ready for it. She did not ask me and tried to pull my head into a kiss. When I pulled back and said not yet, she went silent and didn't say another word, so I had to just leave. Logan, of course, tried to make this all about him. I had to say when I got home, I'm the one who just went through this. I need time to process. For him to stop saying how awful of a person he is and how I should just leave him, anticipating me to comfort him. And for the first time, I didn't. We were supposed to go to the Rim Fair as a group that weekend, and I didn't feel comfortable going before Bunny and I discussed what had happened. She, however, didn't want to meet in person and only wanted to communicate through written format. When I said that she had told me and agreed to one thing, consent, and she acted another way, forcing herself on me, and I was upset by her reaction to it, or lack thereof, she gave me the silent treatment while still constantly messaging Logan. We eventually communicated through email, where she repeatedly brushed off her responsibility for her actions. But I was so used to that with Logan that I thought it was fine and normal, and I was in the wrong. All during this time, Logan and Bunny are getting closer and denying it to everyone around them who points it out. They were frequently mistaken as a couple of the group because they were always joking and giggling and fucking around. The next week, I broke up with Bunny when the straw broke the camel's back. She told me that she views Logan as her soulmate and would always put more energy into her best friend relationships than her romantic relationships because she always wants to act her best with her partner, but wants to be real with friends only. That was just such bullshit to me, and I couldn't take it, and I broke up with her over text since she was still refusing to meet up to speak with me. 3 days later, she and Logan began dating, although to her, he called her best friend, but our therapist was adamant that he was in a romantic relationship with her, which he was, so to me, he called her partner. He texted her constantly. They spent every Sunday together. And even when I was having panic attacks and experiencing psychosis over the fact that someone who's supposed to be good to me was spending time with someone who had assaulted me was just too much. He constantly took her side and began bringing her into our screaming match fights. He once told me that she said, I never do anything for him, so why should he do anything for me? And he agreed with her while screaming in my face. The fall of 2022 was the worst month of my life. We were rarely even sleeping in the same bed. I cried all day, every day, screaming matches every night where he would be touching my nose with his screaming in my face. I started packing bags I don't know how many times and told him I was leaving, to which he would suddenly switch tones and beg me to stay, claiming that he would change, and then when that wouldn't work, he would become scary and tell me he wouldn't allow me to leave. I couldn't have any money because, look around, he made the money for everything and I did nothing. And he would tell me that my family wouldn't take me in because I'm queer, so I had no way to leave. One time, and I'm ashamed of this, I got in his face and screamed that this is what he does to me, and he pushed me hard into a wall and I fell on the floor. To be honest, I can't even remember the moment from a first-person perspective. I completely disassociated. After he pushed me and I fell on the floor, I got up and calmly walked to the bedroom and barricaded the door behind me as it didn't have a lock. There was, however, a patio door there too that I didn't know wasn't locked, so he came in despite my pleas for some time alone. He was sobbing and begging me not to call the police or leave because he would look so bad if I did. He said he was sorry over and over and kept blocking me from leaving once I had packed my bag. He wouldn't let me leave, and I finally gave up and slept on the couch. The next day, it was like it had never happened. A couple days prior, he had threatened to call the police because I had gently put my hand on his chest as he was screaming in my face, and I asked him to back up. He grabbed my wrist and threw my hand away, saying he would call the police for me putting my hands on him, and they would believe me because I'm crazy. In October, I told him I was leaving, that he could either have a relationship with me or with Bunny, but my mental health was suffering and I could not do this anymore. It took him 3 days to decide I was the one he wanted. I believe it was on or around Halloween when I drove him to Olympia to break up with Bunny. He cried the whole way home that night I had made him do this. I kept trying to stand my ground and say, "No, I gave you a choice and this is what you chose." Our therapist had to remind him of that multiple times and straight up say to Logan, "This is not Piper's fault and you need to stop telling them it is." In the session, he would agree, but then, as soon as the call ended, he would begin screaming at me that this was all my fault and that I took away his soulmate from him, and how dare I do this when I don't even do anything for him. Somehow, I was able to stand my ground. Around this time was also when the financial abuse was at its worst. I never knew where our money was going or what was happening with it. Just knew that most of the time my card was being declined. We were fighting about money constantly. When he would blame me for not knowing stuff or me not having access to our bank account, I would say, "Okay, give me the password then." And suddenly he would have an excuse for how he couldn't remember it or would get it to me later. When he would spread his arms gesturing at our whole home, he would say, "Look at all this stuff. I did this, not you. You contribute nothing, and I do everything." I would say, "Okay, I'll get a job." He would respond with tears and sobbing, saying, "How could I get a job? Don't I know how bad that would make him look if he made a disabled person work when he had a successful YouTube channel?" This cycle continued. A couple weeks later was the scariest incident of our marriage. We were in Portland. It was night, and we were about to head home from a club that he had suggested we go to. In the car in the parking lot, we were talking about our childhoods, and he said that he had been sexually abused by being punished for masturbating. I told him that wasn't sexual abuse, and it was religious. And he got the most upset he had ever been. He began screaming in my face about how dare I invalidate his trauma and tell him what happened to him. He was so close to my face that I could feel his breath and spit getting on me as he screamed. I calmly told him to please stop because there were people around, and he screamed that he didn't care who saw. I said I wanted to get out of the car, and he locked the doors and physically held me back from unlocking and reaching the handle. I said I was calling the police, and he took my phone out of my hand. I begged him to let me out, and I said I don't want to ride with him, and I would find a way home. He screamed that he wouldn't allow me money or my phone, so how would I get anywhere? I took my ring off and tossed it in the floor and cried, begging him to let me out. He was clenching his fist, and he looked like he might hit me or grab me. When I flinched, he screamed, "How dare you act like I would hit you? I would never do that." The club manager came out and knocked on the window, and Logan rolled it down, smiled, put on a charming voice, and reassured the manager that all was well. Then he started driving home, the 2-hour drive that felt like a million. I stopped responding to him, just looked out the window while he continued to scream that I was abusing him by invalidating his trauma. He drove recklessly, and I just wanted to be safe, so I apologized. I put my ring back on, calmed him down, and held his hand the rest of the way home. The next day, it was like nothing had happened. We had been somewhat discussing the possibility of spending some time apart to give us each some space. But Logan came to me with the idea that we spend the month of December apart. I very quickly agreed. What I didn't know was that he requested this time because he wanted to get back with Bunny without my knowledge. So we spent most of 2022 apart. And that was when I realized I was happier alone than I was with him. Up until this point, he had had me completely convinced that I was the taker in our codependent relationship because I was sick, and that meant that I always took from Logan and he was always giving. I felt like such shit about myself. I felt like I was destroying his life by being sick. He would tell me that he couldn't be mad at the concept, so he was mad at me, and eventually I just believed him. During this time apart from him, I finally started questioning that. It was when I was in so much pain that I had to crawl across the floor that I realized I was happier without him. I would rather crawl across the floor on my hands and knees than him help me walk. To meet my pain without shame or blame was a new experience that felt so much better than what I'd been living through. During December, Logan also decided that it was time I was financially independent. He decided it was no longer his responsibility to pay for my medical bills, food, gas, anything. He decided to put a down payment on a car for me so that I had a mode of transportation, and he claimed it was a Christmas gift. He expected me to make the monthly payments on the car by donating plasma twice a week until the $12,000 debt was paid off, because once again, he didn't want me to get a real job. So I began donating plasma twice a week until I was anemic. This was how I paid for my pain medicine, food, and gas because our joint bank account was constantly overdrawn. Upon realizing that I was way happier alone and donating plasma for my own money for once, I told Logan at the end of December that I wanted a divorce. At first, he began by begging me not to, then screaming at me, how dare I leave him, and then it was like upon realizing that this time I wasn't budging, he calmly gave in. He agreed that this was the best choice and told me he still wanted to make videos with me. He told me that he wanted out of the relationship a long time ago, but he didn't want to leave because of how people would perceive him leaving a disabled person. He said he was afraid of what I would say about him because I apparently don't talk too nicely about people who... And he trailed off. I still didn't know that he had been back in contact with Bunny and still believed I was the taker in our relationship, so I agreed that we would still be friends and do things together. It was really weird when he left and asked for one more kiss. I felt full disgust during that kiss. I remember telling my friends and family the most minute details about our separation and everyone being really mad at him, and I still didn't understand why. I still thought I was the problem. January 9th, 2023, I moved into my own apartment, and I began to feel peace for the first time. Logan and I were speaking amicably, but I was really weirded out that he was continuing to say I love you to me. I was terrified we're starting anything with him, so I just kept saying it back. A couple days later, as I was unpacking my apartment, I started getting notifications for Observe, and I realized that I hadn't logged out of things yet on my phone. I was getting login verification notifications for another Mac and iPhone. Logan doesn't have either of those, so I knew it was Bunny. I texted him asking if I needed to do anything with the notifications, just to see if he would come clean. And he told me he was changing the passwords. I said, no, you're not. I know it's Bunny, which he denied. I then told him I could see on his calendar that he had hired her back almost 2 weeks earlier. He just told me to log out of everything and that it wasn't my business what he did. I asked, why did you lie to me? And he said he never did. I then told him that things were no longer amicable and I needed all my stuff back by midnight or I was calling the cops for theft. Around 9 p.m., he dropped off maybe a quarter of my stuff in the rain outside of my apartment building and never let me know he had dropped it off, so it was all soaked. This is where I began waking up to everything that he had been doing to me and how fucked it all was. I began sharing some things online and he texted me asking me to keep our shit off the internet because I was making him look bad. I said if you wanted to look good, then you wouldn't have acted the way you did, and I will share what I want. Most of you know how the next few months went. I lived in Lacey, Washington, worked at Starbucks. I met a lot of amazing people and had some of the most enjoyable months of my life. I met someone who was supposed to be a hookup, but it's been a year now and he's the kindest, softest, funniest person I know, and he loves me like he knows what the word means. In April, I had a mental breakdown and went into psychosis. He was there as a steady support until my mom arrived. After a few weeks, I moved back to my hometown in Wisconsin. I had the most incredible support from my parents and siblings. My parents have housed me, fed me, taken care of my dogs, found me a lawyer, and paid my bills. This is the first year of my adult life where I felt constant love from those around me. I felt safe, heard, and supported. When things arise, like Logan demanding I send him my filming and editing equipment, I have my parents speak to him for me and have my back. I would not have gotten through this without their help. Shout out to my therapist as well. I would do anything for her. People who have been in abusive relationships will understand when I say that safety sometimes doesn't feel safe after so many years of chaos. It's an adjustment to move into peace and normalcy. What I thought was normal for so long was so far from it. I still struggle every day to not police my body language, to question if I'm imagining my pain, or wondering if I'm being dramatic. During their divorce cool-off period that's required by law, Logan has been less than cooperative. After 5 attempts, I finally have most of my stuff back, although he destroyed some of it by throwing glass bulbs to shatter over everything. He also said he would do our taxes jointly, but then tried to gaslight me and my parents when we asked if they were done yet, and he said he was never going to do them in the first place. He has withheld income from me that is legally mine, as well as our hefty tax return. He continues to have videos with me up on his channel, to which I am not seeing a cent. He's threatened me with defamation, but I've decided I'm not going to cower in fear while he continues to spread dangerous messages and gains a following. Logan Portnier does not deserve a platform, as he has no credentials and he is a dangerous, abusive person, and so is his manager, Bunny Ann. Thank you for reading. Please be safe and be well.